Today we're talking about a really interesting microgeneration, a group of people who are kind of caught between two completely different worlds. They had one foot in an analog childhood and the other in a digital adulthood.
So let's just start with a sound. Does that noise, that whole symphony of screeching and beeping, does that instantly take you back somewhere? If you know exactly what that sound is, well then you might just be one of the people we're talking about today.
So who are these folks, really? They were born on the very edge of two massive cultural identities. You know, they don't feel quite like Gen X, but they don't totally see themselves as millennials either. They're living right there in the overlap, a pretty unique generational spot to be in. And they have a name. They're called Xennials. The name itself is, a mashup of Gen X and millennial, which is perfect because it really describes their role as a bridge between the two. Now, people debate the exact years, but that 1977 to 1983 window is pretty much the accepted range.
And this quote it absolutely nails the heart of the Xennial experience. It's this feeling of being a cusper. It's almost like a generational imposter syndrome, right? You get all the references from both sides, but you never feel like you 100% belong to either group.
To really get what makes an Xennial tick, we've got to jump in a time machine. We have to go back to when they were kids, a time before the internet was just there, when the whole world looked and sounded and just felt totally different.
For Xennials, childhood was tangible. I mean, it was making a perfect mixtape on a cassette for your Walkman, or doing a book report by pulling a giant encyclopedia off the shelf. It was going to the library and actually using a card catalog. It was calling your friend on their landline, you probably still have that number memorized, maybe on one of those awesome see-through phones. And the height of technology, that was the school computer lab.
And, nothing captures that shared cultural moment better than the Oregon Trail. This quote from Amy Stack's TEDx talk just gets it so right. It wasn't just a computer game. It was this whole event, a real digital adventure in a world that was still almost entirely analog. But then, right as they were hitting their teens and early adulthood, everything changed. And it happened so fast. This was the great digital shift.
And that whole transition really started with the sound of the dial-up modem. I mean, that piece of technology just perfectly captures their in-between state. You were connecting to this brand new digital world, but that connection, it was loud, it was slow, and you had to hang up if your mom needed to use the phone.
I mean, just look at this timeline. The pace of this evolution was absolutely breakneck. When they were kids, a Commodore 64 was a total marvel. By the time they were teenagers, they were on dial-up. In their early 20s, they were figuring out MySpace and the original college-only Facebook. And then, just as they were starting their careers, bam, the iPhone shows up and puts the entire internet in their pocket. Everything changed all over again.
And this timing, this is absolutely the key. Xennials are pretty much the last generation to get through their awkward, formative years, I'm talking high school and college, without the constant pressure and documentation of social media. Their bad haircuts, their cringy fashion choices, those moments just disappeared. They weren't saved for eternity online.
So what does all of this do to a person's brain? How does living through such a massive technological shift actually shape your outlook on the entire world?
Well, what you get is this fascinating hybrid. The Xennial mindset takes that practical, independent, kind of cynical worldview from Gen X, but it also absorbed the optimism and tech-friendliness of the Millennials. The result is this perfect description: skeptical hope. They believe things can get better, but they've seen enough to be really practical about it. And that pragmatism was really hammered home by a tough economic reality. Just as a lot of older Xennials were finally getting into the workforce and trying to build their careers, the 2008 Great Recession hit, and the impact was just devastating. It left their long-term wealth a staggering 34% lower than it should have been. That's a setback that would shape how they thought about money for years to come.
Yeah, and you can totally see how that experience left a mark. When you ask them what they're afraid of in the next recession, their answers aren't abstract. They're super practical. As you can see, 40% worry because they have a family to protect now, and another quarter of them are just focused on making ends meet, which is a direct echo of that instability they faced right out of the gate.
But here's where that skeptical hope mindset really shines. Because they went through that financial fire, a slight majority of them, 53%, actually feel more prepared for the next crisis. They learned some really hard lessons, and it gave them this defensive, value-focused outlook that's become a real hallmark of their generation.
So, where does this unique history put Xennials in today's world? Well, in a lot of ways, they aren't just a product of the digital divide.
They're kind of the architects of the bridge across it.
Think about it. Because they grew up with one foot in the analog world and the other in the digital one, they're basically bilingual. They totally get life before the internet, but they were also young enough to become fluent in the new digital language. This makes them the ultimate bridge generation.
And this is basically their superpower, especially at work. A Xennial can explain the latest TikTok trend to their Gen X boss and then turn right around and explain some important offline context to their younger millennial teammates. They're not afraid to pick up the phone and leave a voicemail, but they're just as comfortable living in a Slack channel. All that constant change made them incredibly adaptable, blending that healthy skepticism with a real entrepreneurial drive.
So in the end, Xennials are way more than just a pop culture curiosity. They are the living memory of one of the biggest transitions in human history. Their whole experience is a roadmap of how we got from a world of cassette tapes to a world of endless scrolling. And it leaves us with one last really important question to think about. What can we all learn from the last generation that actually remembers what life was like before?
If you enjoyed this video, hit the like and subscribe button and join our community of bridge builders. Let's keep exploring the weird and wonderful ways our psychology shapes who we are today. See you in the next one.